Let's talk about Alien Isolation for a moment. You really ought to remember it, and not just for the obvious reasons. In my opinion, it's an incredible game and was a completely unexpected hit, especially considering it was made by the team behind Total War. I bring it up not just because I want you to recall that masterpiece, but because the game I'm diving into today seems desperate for you to remember it. Hey folks, it's Alex from Playgrid, and today we are talking about Alien Rogue Incursion, and whether if it's worth a buy or not. And believe me when I say it is practically begging you to think about that 2014 horror classic. From my perspective, it's leaning heavily on nostalgia by including Worker Joe's, name-dropping Amanda Ripley, and even making a few mentions of Sevastopol Station. I see it as essentially a follow-up, but it's a strange one, lacking any connection to the original developer, Creative Assembly, or its publisher, Sega. Instead, this game was developed and published by Survios, a studio that, in my experience, has a history of putting out a lot of merely okay VR games, and that's about it. But here's the thing that I find to be a real head-scratcher with this one. Despite all the ways it desperately tries to connect itself to Isolation, I feel it lands much closer in spirit to Colonial Marines. Now, I know that might sound like a harsh insult, but I want to be clear that from my point of view, it's only kind of an insult. Alien Rogue Incursion is, at its heart, a shooter where I found myself piling up alien bodies with a few pretty standard weapons. It's set in yet another location inspired by Alien, where my gruff space marine protagonist uncovers another conspiracy about a greedy company trying to weaponize the Xenomorph. To me, this is Colonial Marines all over again, right down to its flimsy attempts to tie itself to a beloved pillar of the franchise. Side of the Isolation references, which to my eyes stick out like a sore thumb, the setup feels incredibly generic. Those references are, frankly, the only memorable parts of the plot. As I see it, the story is just another excuse for an alien adventure, and the characters and writing gave me very little to care about. The one exception, I'll admit, is your synth companion, who I actually thought was a pretty charming fellow. While you might think I'm being pretty negative about the game from all this, I'm actually not. I'll be the first to admit that this game isn't breaking any new ground, and its story is just sort of there. I think it's actually pretty good. It's not going to be some Game of the Year contender. I can tell you right now that's not going to happen. But what this is, in my opinion, is a really fun game. Sometimes I feel that certain elements just being okay is more than good enough. I know 2025 is a year stacked with incredible titles, but there are times when I just want to sit down, blast some aliens, and have a good time without overthinking it. And for me, that's exactly what this comfort food FPS provides. My feeling on Alien Rogue Incursion is that while it won't blow you away in any single aspect, it's a well-designed game that I found to be quite entertaining for its fairly short runtime. And with a price tag of $29.99, well, I believe you could do a lot worse with your money. Now, I have to imagine that the experience of the original VR version was, depending on your personal taste, either a bit more thrilling or perhaps a little less polished. The version of Rogue Incursion I'm playing today is the updated Evolved Edition, which is the non-VR release featuring some graphical enhancements and gameplay tweaks that I can't really comment on since I didn't play the original VR version. However, I can definitely see the telltale signs of it being a former VR game. It has what I'd call constant and somewhat unnecessary motion control elements that have been simplified into QTEs. The text is gigantic, and there's barely any inertia or camera shake. I mean, you can really tell its origins when you run. Instead of a blur effect or increased head bob, you just move faster. I have to think that everything about this game was probably a little more impressive in VR. When it comes to the graphics, I'd say they're pretty decent, but they didn't astound me, especially when I put it against the 10-year-old Alien Isolation. To my eye, it has that kind of mobile game sheen that I often see in VR titles. This is despite it being built on Unreal 5, which apparently was a bit much for VR headsets, as the original game was often dinged for poor performance. This non-VR version on my computer ran perfectly fine. I didn't experience any slowdown or stuttering while running the game at max settings with ray tracing enabled. You wouldn't necessarily know my graphics were set to epic though, because I noticed some weirdly fuzzy shadows, and the overall visuals just don't feel cutting edge in any significant way. But I'm not saying it can't look good, it definitely can. What I will say is they did a great job capturing the retro-future aesthetic of the Alien franchise. Some sections of the game look downright moody, and I have to admit, for a VR game, it looks quite impressive. As a non-VR game, it's just alright in my book. I'm not trying to take a big old crap on it, I just think it is what it is. What makes this game good, fun, and enjoyable for me isn't any of that, it's the gameplay. I found it to be a satisfying combination of survival horror and some good old-fashioned FPS action. You're in an interconnected facility full of locked doors, and you make progress by finding key cards and new tools that grant access to new areas and supply caches. What I've just described might sound like a Metroidvania, but I can assure you this is not a non-linear game. There is, however, an element of exploration that I appreciate as you're constantly scrounging for supplies to keep yourself topped up. Aliens appear from time to time, and true to form. They can be tracked using a handheld scanner. It is an aliens game, after all. But while the aliens themselves take a lot of punishment, they are, unfortunately, the part of the game that most reminds me of colonial marines. In my experience, they just don't feel that dangerous, at least in this version of the game. I'll give the game credit that they do at least crawl on the ceiling and seem to try to sneak up on you. And if they get too close, it only takes 1 or 2 good hits and you're dead. They also have an instant kill pounce attack. On paper, they seem pretty dangerous, but in practice, I really didn't have much trouble with them, which is to say I never found the game particularly scary, aside from a few notable moments. The minute-to-minute gameplay did remain tense for me, however, mainly because you can't carry much stuff, so I was always hunting for more supplies. The game also doesn't autosave very often, so I found myself mostly relying on finding these panic rooms to save my game and avoid losing progress after getting killed. For me at least, I didn't die a lot because as long as I had my tracker out, I found it wasn't difficult to predict an alien attack. And when they did appear, dispatching them wasn't hard for most of the game. My biggest concern was usually having enough ammo rather than the aliens themselves, which I suppose isn't the worst thing in the world. The only thing that really makes the Xenomorphs dangerous, in my opinion, is that they're just bullet sponges. I thought the environment was quite fun to explore, though it felt big and open enough with optional rooms off the beaten path. There are notes to read, doors to get unstuck, and little puzzles to figure out. The game essentially has one type of puzzle where you need to reroute power, and while that could have been annoying, I found I could get through them pretty fast. And the controls were responsive. I don't think they dragged the game down too much. They served their purpose and mixed things up. In fact, I have to say I kind of like them. But in theory, if you told me about them, probably be skeptical. But for whatever reason, I enjoyed doing them. To me, the exploration is the most satisfying part of the game. I really like how the environment circles around and connects in on itself. There's just something that tickles my lizard brain about unlocking a sealed door that leads back to a location I've already been to. I don't know why, and it's not unique to this game, but I feel this game does it well. You're slowly opening this entire base back up, and I think the way the game encourages re-exploring areas by having you backtrack with a new tool or key card is well done, and I like doing it. Do think the game runs out of steam a little bit in the back half, which is not great, since it's not a very long game to begin with. I'd say you can finish it in about 6.5 hours if you're quick, maybe 8 if you want to explore carefully. And in my opinion, carefully exploring is what makes the game fun. What I found particularly weird is how it ends on an abrupt cliffhanger, with basically nothing about the actual story being revealed. Very few loose ends get tied up, leaving you with what I can only describe as half of a story, because this is supposedly a 2-part game. It's not clear if we'll ever get that second part, and that's no knock on the developers. We just live in a world where you never know. I will say it probably would have been nice to wrap things up a bit more satisfyingly. It just kind of ends. Another unfortunate thing about this game, in my view, is the lack of enemy variety. I know it's an alien game, so of course, you're mostly fighting xenomorphs, but there's really only one type of xenomorph here. There's no real variants, no dog xenos, no bull xenos, just the classic alien. Once in a while, a face hugger appears, and they do keep you on your toes because nobody wants that, but that's it. I find it baffling that there are literally only 3 enemy types in the entire game, and one of them is the final boss. I have to say, I'm glad there are no human mercenaries or other dumb crap like that, but I think they could have at least had some rogue worker joes to mix things up, especially since the models are already in the game. The variety of encounters is low, but I will say the game does mix things up occasionally with these defense segments where you have to hold your ground against an onslaught of aliens. For me, these are the standout combat moments, and like I said, I find the combat to be fun. You get proximity grenades you can place for defense, and you can lock doors and reroute power to block certain vents, which I think is a fun tactical layer. I do wish there was a little more to these events, like maybe an automated turret, but what's here works for me. It's entertaining, it's enjoyable, and I like it. Your arsenal of weapons is, in my opinion, pretty standard. You get a revolver, a pulse rifle, and a riot shotgun. That's the whole arsenal, and they work well enough. I found the shotgun satisfying for point-blank shots, and the revolver is quite powerful. But I don't know why there isn't a smart gun, other than the fact that they're planning a part 2. The weapons do feel a bit underpowered to me. They just don't have a lot of oomph. I'm guessing that's a consequence of it being a VR game originally. I feel they could have improved the visual effects to give them more pop. The way everything goes down just makes me think it could be better. The way the bullets hit the aliens doesn't really help either. From what I could tell, they either seem to ignore getting shot or just flop over like a wet noodle. Their acid blood does at least damage you. It's so weak that it barely even registers. I feel that a game leaning into survival horror would be a perfect opportunity to make the xenomorph acid more dangerous, but for some reason, they didn't do it. So I think it's really important to say that while the story is pretty bland and unforgettable, the shooting is good but not great, and the graphics are not cutting edge. Damn if the core gameplay loop isn't solid. To me, it's satisfying. You explore, kill aliens, read notes, and unlock new tools. It's that classic survival horror formula where a lot of the individual elements don't stand out. Everything comes together really well in my eyes. I mean, the shooting in the classic Resident Evil games wasn't incredible either. It was the resource management that kept things interesting. It does the same thing here. I think what hurts the game most is that it is only a part 1. It just feels incomplete, and the runtime isn't long. But I also have to say that's not so bad. Again, for $29, I think 6 or 7 hours of solid survival horror that emphasizes action is pretty decent. It's maybe a little unfortunate that it's not super scary outside of one part where they first introduced the face hugger, which I found pretty intense and innovative. I imagine that was pants wetting in VR, but it was still pretty effective for me in non-VR otherwise. I describe it as a workmanlike but fun Alien franchise tie-in. Isolation stand out because, let's be real, this is not Isolation. I don't even think it's trying to be. But that doesn't mean it's not fun, because I believe it is. If you want a good Alien game that's going to be fun, I think this is $30 well spent. Probably my biggest complaint is the cliffhanger ending. I just think it's lame, and I really hope we get part 2. We'll absolutely play part 2. There's no question in my mind. I'm satisfied enough with this that I'm ready to drop another $30 for a 6 or 7 hour second part if it's as good or better than this one. That's just what I think. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment and let me know. If you like this video and my take on the game, click like. And don't forget to enable notifications. Thank you very much for watching.